my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and this is the Wednesday video where I answer your questions. So, first question comes from Raymond Noah, 6394. Would you rather buy one big book or 5 lower price books as a newbie collector? So, there's a lot to this kind of question, and it sort of really goes to your collecting style. There's a lot of collectors that go after high grades, and then just one book, but super high grade, like a 9.8 or some high grade copy of a book. In Golden Age, maybe it'd be like 8.0 or something like that, where it's a little bit lower than the modern 9.8, but still high grade for that issue. And generally what happens is when you go for that, it is much pricier than maybe 5 books that are like 2.0s. Another thing that could be is that if you go for a high grade, or not just a high grade book, but just a big book like Action 1. Well, Action 1, you could buy entire comic collections with the cost of that one book. So the question is, how much of a budget do you have? You have to look at it from your budget standpoint, and how much risk do you want to take with that budget? Whenever you put money into the stock market or into the comic market, you have to almost assume that you're going to lose it all. That is just, it is money that you're playing with, and it potentially could be lost. And how much, and this is a good way to assess risk, is basically say, okay, if I lose all this money, how much would I be fine with losing? I know it sounds kind of a weird thing that, people are always talking about how comics are always going to go up and everything's always going to be peachy, but it's not always the case. So you always have to sort of interpret it with the worst possible case scenario, where it's worth nothing. At the end of the day, it's just paper. And how much are you willing to risk if you see it as an investment? Now, the thing is, generally, you have to decide how best to manage that risk. So let's say your risk that you're willing to take is $10,000, which is a pretty big sum of money, but you're confident enough that if you lose that, you're fine without that money. You'd rather not lose it, but worst case scenario, you lose it all. Then you got to determine what's the best way to where to put that money. So first, do you buy that one big book, $10,000 book? What can you get for $10,000? You can get some pretty great Golden Age key books, like even a Chamber of Chills 19. You can get like a fairly, it'd be low grade, but it'd be still like a very presentable copy of that book. You could get some kind of minor key books. You could even get a suspense Sensation Comics #1 in a 0.5 grade. So there's a whole bunch of options that you could have to spend that money. And the reason I say Sensation 1 and a 0.5, that's a big book, and you could put it all into that. It's a very low grade on a big book, but it is a big book. So those are some of the options. Okay. Another option is, now let's consider, instead of putting it all into one big book, let's put it into 5 books. And then what would that look like? Well, then we got, instead of 10,000, we got 2,000 per book. And you can get some really great books for 2,000 per book. Personally, I would do the latter, which is to take, buy 5 books that are $2,000 each. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Recently, I did the hottest comics of the Golden Age from on the weekend, and there was a major grail like Superman 1 that had lost $1 million in value. It just overnight, it's gone. That's $1 million. So if you had put all your money into that one basket, you'd be out $1 million. And that's pretty significant. That kind of sale can actually impact lower grades of that book, or other copies of the book just because it can give a signal to the market that the price is over it's been over what it should be. It's overhyped, which might not be true. It just could be where it was sold. There's like a whole bunch of things, but that's the risk that you take with big books. That there can be corrections in the market, and if you have all your money in one book, well, then you're stuck with that book. The same can happen across 5 books, but one of the investment tips I have always heard is, let's say you invest in 10 things. Generally, what will happen is, if you invest reasonably smart, 1 will become a super success, 5 will kind of break even, and the other 4 will probably just not be worth anything. So by spreading your risk across multiple books, you're actually spreading the risk and reducing that probability that you're going to be stuck holding the bag on something big. And you also increase the chance that you might strike it out of the park and you get this really big book that goes up in value. Generally, as a golden age collector, like I consider myself more of a golden age collector, I'm mitigating that risk by looking at historical trend lines. And with golden age, it's more about looking at how is that book faring year after year, and it's more of a steady growth rather than big spikes. With modern books, you'll get a bigger spike, but also a bigger drop if for whatever reason that book is no longer hot. So you got to kind of choose your market, and the advice that I'm trying to give right now can apply to either market. What you have to do is look at those trend lines. Even like during COVID, where it appeared, the market's going to go through the roof, and it's just going to keep on going up, and it's always going to be good. If you were a savvy collector, you would ignore that bubble that was going to pop eventually, and just say, okay, well, where are the trend lines? Where are these books on that trend line? If they're off the trend line, and if they're way off the trend line, hold back. Just wait. Things have a tendency of correcting. You can even look historically, like even on those same trend lines, you'll see like little spikes, and it'll usually go up and then spike and come back, but it'll kind of stay within a trend line. And if you kind of look at books that way, you can minimize your risk as well. The next part of this, I'm trying to give a full answer, because you mentioned that you're a new collector, and I really want you to go into it with with looking at it as a financial decision. How are you going to spend your money, and how you're going to get the best result with your money? So look at the trend lines for how those books sold over time. You can use sites like Go Collect or GPA analysis, and you can see those kind of trend lines. And if the book is on the trend line, good. If it's a little bit lower than the trend line, even better. If it's above the trend line, beware. Simple as that. And then picking your 5 books versus your 1 book, I recommend the 5 books. But it's really up to you as a collector, ultimately. And this is the great thing about comics versus stocks. Stocks, as I said, and comics can both go to 0. But at least with comics, even if it goes to 0, if you love what you bought, does it really matter? You can still enjoy it. So that's another thing. Buy what you like as well in that mix. So I hope you enjoyed that answer. Hopefully it was useful. Rather long-winded answer, but hopefully it was good. Next comes from K. Munin. What do you think is the biggest factor that has led to the decline of the comic book industry? And can it ever be fixed? One of the things that you have to look at is what brought back the life to the comic book community and comic book collecting. If you look at like the early 2000s, comics were kind of dead. It wasn't an active market the way it is more now even. around 2016, 2017, comics became popular again. And the reason for that, and this is the whole point, is movies were good. We had Endgame, we had Avengers movies, we had a whole bunch of movies that made people interested in what was the source material for those great movies. And that sort of brought a lot of collectors back into the market. And, you know, even myself, I kind of got back into the market around that time period where I missed the whole comic hobby, and I was watching these movies, and it kind of made me want to get back into the hobby and more full force than I had been in the past. And that is something that you have to understand, that movies can really drive the market. Well, what's the biggest factor in decline? Well, it's the same thing. If the movies are bad, if they consistently make movies that don't appeal to the audiences and more about pushing an agenda, that can turn away audiences and make people less interested in the comics, and actually really, really want to just move away from those comics. And and it's kind of a sad thing, but it does happen. Another problem that has been killing the comic book market is really the difference between manga and comics. So manga is really hot right now. Scholastic books, really hot right now, like Dogman. If you want to get a good investment book for comics, well, get Dogman. Get a first print early, #1 of Dogman. That has potential to go up in value. Get books like Captain Underpants. Those are books that have that are fun and have a built-in audience, an audience that loves them and really buys those books en masse. Every school will buy them. Another one is Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It even had good movies to go with it. So these books have an audience that appreciates them, and they're a young audience, and that's key. So manga is same. It actually has like a pretty broad audience, because manga writes, the way the writers work in manga is they'll write books based on very niche groups, niche target audiences. They don't try to go for mass appeal. They don't try to be diverse in terms of who they're appealing to. They'll go for a very unique audience, and they tell stories based on telling a good story rather than anything else. That's huge. So those two groups of books are really where younger readers are going, and a lot of even older readers are going. Like, they're embracing those two genres. Whereas comics are preachy. They generally don't have very good stories. The art on the cover might be nice, but the interior's junk. They really haven't kept up with the other options, and they're not appealing to younger readers. That's the big problem. So you're not getting this younger audience that's going to keep the hobby going. So we have bad movies, we have bad comics, and you wonder why people are not reading them. Well, that's why. You're not getting those younger audiences. And generally, the collectors that I see nowadays, it's older collectors like myself who fell in love with the hobby in the 90s and, wanted to sort of relive that childhood. And now that we have a bit more money, we want to buy a bit more cooler, bigger books. And we're not buying the modern books as much. We're buying those older books that are from our childhood, or the ones that we dreamed of having as a child. But we don't have that younger generation that has that same connection to comics. And I think that's the problem. So the way to correct this is for comic book writers to get some of the bad writers out of the hobby, get them out of the comic book market, and get some good writers that understand the source material that they are working with, and get ones that actually appreciate and love the character and not just want to push some agenda, and do the same with the movies, that they say, hey, look, we got all this great source material that we've built up over the last 80 years. Let's start using that to make movies rather than, some new version of the movie where even the writers themselves admit that they never read the comics or never really understood the characters. Get people that can take the existing source material and really bring it to the screen. And I think if you do those things, the market will come back and you'll get those younger readers involved. Another thing that we can do as older people, if you're in my generation and you have children or grandchildren, is get them reading comics. And, even if it's not the modern comics, you don't have to necessarily get them onto the modern comics. Maybe some old reader comics that you have available that you can sort of give them and like get them into it, where there's some really great stories that that you can find in the dollar bin still, like from the 90s or 80s or even 70s, where you can give those comics to your kids and really get them reading and appreciating good storytelling. So those are some of the things that can be done. I'm hoping that things will come back. I actually was very positive going out of both the Flash movie and Across the Spider-Verse movie. I felt like they get that storytelling is important, and that gives me hope for the future, because those do appeal to younger audiences. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. Okay, next question comes from Martin Bow. If you have a full run on a short-lived series, can you please show off each issue? Okay, so I'm going to actually show you a bunch of cool things. I'm going to show you two sets of comics, if that makes sense. The first is, and this you'll see these books again in my future unboxings. But you're getting a bit of a sneak preview for the unboxings that are coming up over the next couple weeks. And the first one is a title called Wolfgal. Now, Wolfgal is created by Al Cap, and it features good girl art, a bit of a fun story where she lures men back to her cave and for dinner, basically, and eats the men. So just a fun story, this sort of temptress that lures men with her sexiness. So that's Wolfgal number 1. It only ran 2 issues. So we got Wolfgal number 2. So this is 1 and 2, and that's the whole series. Another book, if you're interested in the character, that you should find if you're looking for her, is Little Abner. I think it's 63, yes. And this is the first appearance of Wolfgal. Okay, so those are the 3 books. It's not a big challenge to get those 3 books. They're a little bit more pricey because there's a lot of people that like Wolfgal. But yeah, those are the 3 for her. Now another series, and the reason I'm showing 2 is they're both small series, is one called Canteen Kate. And I'm going to show you Canteen Kate number 1. And this was created by Matt Baker. So this is Canteen Kate number 1. And it's just a great good girl art comic. And we got Canteen Kate number 2. Another Matt Baker cover. These are all done by Matt Baker. And recently, and this will be in the unboxing that is coming up, and this will be in the finale, actually. This is part of the finale books that I picked up. This is Canteen Kate number 3. Got a nice 4-5. Just a really great cover. This is actually my favorite of the 3 covers. I really like this one. So this is Canteen Kate number 3. So that's just another short-lived series. It only lasted 3 issues. But actually, Canteen Kate was a character that had, a fairly prominent role in another series. And this is where she made her first appearance in a series called Fighting Marines. And this is Fighting Marines number 2, which she made her first appearance. And you can see her right up there, Canteen Kate. So this is where she made her first appearance, and she was fairly active in this comic throughout it. And then eventually, I guess, out of popularity, she got her own title. So those are the 4 books that you'd get for her if you're interested in Canteen Kate. So just some really great good girl art characters. If you're into that, I enjoy that, obviously, and I thought you might like those books. There's actually a few others. I finished a bunch of short-lived series, so if you want to see more, just tell me. Okay, next comes from Comic Mag Musings. Are you currently, or do you have planned to collect the 9 comics that were banned by the U.S. Congress in the 50s? Okay, so what happened was after The Seduction of the Innocent came out, and then there was the Senate hearings. There were 9 books that were banned by Congress, and they were banned for various reasons: for sexual innuendos, for graphic gore and violence. And I'm going to read you the titles of these books and give you a little explanation for each. I do collect these. All of these were actually on my want list. I didn't realize that they were banned books, though. So you added something to my knowledge, but they were all on my want list. And 3 of them are actually, one is being sent to me, and the other 2 I'm bidding on right now and trying to win. so I might get 3 of the 9. But right now I don't have any in my collection. Okay, so the first is City of the Living Dead from 1952. It is it's a really cool cover. It's like a zombie that's in bondage, and there's this kind of good girl standing in front of him, whipping him, and literally ripping the skin off him. Pretty violent, pretty gory, but it's a cool cover. So it's City of the Living Dead. It was a one-shot from 1952. The next one is Mysterious Adventures number 16. And this is from October of 1953. It's basically like an operation being conducted with skeletons performing as doctors. So kind of a weird cover. I'm actually trying to get the complete run of Mysterious Adventures, so this was on my want list anyways. A lot of these were already on my want list. It's kind of funny because I was collecting these series anyways. The next one is Strange Mysteries number 1. And this one is from September of 1951. And it's actually a Canadian book. It's from Superior Comics. And it features necrophilia. Basically, you got these skeletons and zombies. And they have like sort of like almost, it's very sexually suggestive. With this woman that's alive, obviously, and maybe being kind of molested. It's a really messed up book. The cover doesn't really display that, but the interior content does. It's it's a typical like zombie holding a woman cover, but girl in red dress actually too. So yeah, but it is a cool necrophilia book if you're interested in that. That is one of the ones I'm bidding on actually. Yeah, so next is Weird Terror number 6. This is from July of 1953. It's a Don Heck vampire cover, and it's just basically a guy that looks like he's on a boat that's sort of adrift or something, and there's this giant bat kind of going to drink his blood. So that's Weird Terror number 6. Next one is War Fury number 2, and I actually bought this one, so this was actually on its way to me, so already. This is from November of 1952, and it's an interesting one. You got these Chinese and North Korean soldiers, and they're basically getting ready they're kind of turning into werewolves, and they look like they're about to impale 2 American soldiers, one who is like sort of looks like he's already half dead already. He's injured, and the reason that this one has a really kind of cool story behind it, is the reason they kind of thought that this was too extreme was they didn't want to demoralize the troops, and they thought it was just the whole idea of something where it shows that the U.S. Army is at, like, in a state of weakness, I guess. They thought that would be demoralizing for the troops. Next one is Weird Mysteries number 5, from June of 1953. And this is the brainwashing one, where basically you got this is a famous cover. It's obviously going to be on anyone that collects pre-code horror. This is always high on the list for pre-code horror collectors, and it's basically just a gruesome cover. It's like literally it looks like a monkey or a gorilla, and its brain is getting removed. Well, that's pretty gruesome. That's why it's high on my list too. It's usually a pretty pricey book though, but it is on my want list. The next one is another one I really like. I actually bid on this so many times, well, twice, because I've only seen it twice. It's called The Perfect Crime number 23, and it's from April of 1952. And this is the cover that really reminds me of The Ring. It's got this weird green and white wallpaper. It's just got this woman that's kind of looks like she's going to be attacked, and like you got a mirror on next to her where you see the reflection of who is about to attack her. It just reminds me of The Ring, that whole the video clip within The Ring where there's the mirror and she's looking in the mirror. It reminds me of that scene. I always like this cover. It's one that I'm hunting for. So Perfect Crime 23, definitely on my want list. And I didn't realize it got banned. So interesting. That adds bonus to it. Next is Horrific number 2. This is from November of 1952, and it is an interesting one because I actually this one wasn't on my radar. Though I do collect, I actually wanted the series of Horrific. It wasn't necessarily, I didn't really recognize this cover. But there's actually another cover that looks exactly the same, and I thought this one was kind of, I don't know which came out first, but there's another comic called Bomber that they both have a very similar comic cover. Basically, it's the situation where you got these two people and they're playing with marionettes, and the marionettes are like, and the two people that are holding, one's kind of zombie-like, and one is just like this kind of like monster-like woman. And they're holding these marionettes, which are people like a nurse, two boxers, just like a guy in a suit, and the Grim Reaper. So it's just like marionettes and these kind of giant figures holding them. It's just a kind of cool cover. I actually have the Bomber copy, which is like a comic, which is very similar. Like when I saw them, I was like, oh, somebody ripped off somebody. I don't know who did, but very similar covers. And then the last of the 9 is Tomb of Terror number 15. This is the famous or infamous exploding face cover, where you see the guy's eye, like it's half of his face is kind of just like blowing up, his eyes like kind of coming out, and like bits of him are coming off. It is just a gruesome cover, and that is the appeal of it. It is definitely on my want list. I've actually seen it a few times, but even in low grade and even low grade restored, I was looking at one. It was a few $1,000s, and it was just, there was other things that I was buying, and I but it is one that I would love to own. So that's Tomb of Terror number 15. Probably of all these books, the biggest pre-code horror book. Okay, next question comes from user UM4U8VV3E. Very odd username. It's like, but that's your username, so interesting. Which came out first? Okay, so I think last week I was talking about some of my favorite Nazi covers, and actually I messed up on some of the titles. I actually messed up on Boy Comics. I said Boy Comics number 20. Actually, I should have said Boy Comics number 4. That's the one I actually wanted, and actually I just picked it up. So I just recently bought it. I actually found it. I also mentioned a comic called Amazing Mystery Funnies number 13. And I said the reason I was interested in that book because it's a Nazi cover. It's not that it was a Nazi cover, but it was the first appearance of Hitler in comics. And so that's what inspired this question. Which came out first, Sun Fun Comics #1 or Amazing Mystery Funnies #13? Now, if you go to not Go Collect, if you go to Key Collector Comics and you search the character Hitler, it will say Sun Fun Comics #1 is the first appearance of Hitler in comics. Well, is that true? Is that true? No, it is not. Key Collector is wrong on this. I actually looked it up on Grand Database, and I looked at when these books, what their issue dates are. So Sun Fun came out in December 31st, 1939. Amazing Mystery 13, Funnies, Amazing Mystery Funnies #13 came out on October 39, 1939. That's its date on the comic, but actually it actually got released much earlier than that. It was released in August of 1939, so it was out several months before Sun Fun Comics came out. So that's your answer. So I had to do a bit of research to find that out, and it was like checking a few things because the Sun Fun Comics really didn't have much information about it, and it was really, I had to do a little bit more investigating in order to find out those dates. But that's what I found out, and now you know that Key Collector Comics is not quite right on that one. Yeah, so if you want to get the first appearance of Hitler in comics, look for Amazing Mystery Funnies #13. It doesn't have him on the cover, but it does have a Hitler story in it. So that is it for this video. If you have a question that you would like answered, or if you want me to show any comics in my collection, please put it in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer your question. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.